you know, when kids are, little kids fall, they're really close to the ground. So they don't break everything. Like if we fall, we break things. If they fall, they just get a scraped knee. We were kind of close to the ground. And we had no idea if it was going to work, but I just kept sticking to it.
Welcome to the Veranda Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Christine Mills. On the Veranda Entrepreneur Podcast, I feature entrepreneurs while I discuss ways you can grow your business today. Step onto the veranda, get a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's talk shop. Let's do this. Welcome to the Veranda Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Mills. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Sharon Rowe. She is the CEO and founder of Ecobags Products Incorporated. Ecobags is the original reusable bag brand, sold worldwide, recognized as the best for the world by B Corporation for its social and environmental commitments and standards. Sharon is recognized as leader in social innovation, sustainable and responsible production since 1989. She speaks regularly on building profitable, mission and value-aligned businesses, believing that businesses can be a force for good, Sing Sing Prison, the Nairobi Center for Innovation in Kenya, to Social Venture Institute Conference in the Hudson Valley. And she also has been featured in Time Magazine, Glamour Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur Magazine, and she's been on NPR, on Air America, and in the award-winning documentary BagIt. Ecobags was also featured on Oprah's first dedicated Earth Day show. She is the author of a really great book. I enjoyed reading this book. It's called The Magic of Tiny Businesses. You don't have to go big to make a great living. Welcome to the veranda, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You have such a great background. So, I just want us to know a little bit about Sharon. So give us the Sharon 101, where are you from and what were you like as a child?
Oh, my gosh. Oh, really? Right. Let's go back to Camp Woodstock. No, inch by inch, step by step. It's basically, I grew up in central Connecticut outside of Hartford. My dad had an Army-Navy store. He had a men's clothing store before that, but it got taken over by eminent domain, so he was unemployed for a bunch of years, and then he did an Army-Navy store, which was, totally pre-Gap. I'm 63, so this is like, pre-everything.
Okay.
And we had one phone in the house with a really long cord, and whoever got to the phone first would take the phone into whatever room they had. My mom was basically now they call it a stay-at-home mom or whatever, but until my sisters were in high school when she went back and worked, and she's from New York, and she married my dad young, 22, had me, and I grew up sort of in a regular, I didn't know any difference, sort of the cul-de-sac. Every house on the street looked the same, split levels. My best friends were Debbie and Wendy. They lived on either side of me. And, I went to public school, and I was the first one to go to college in my family, the first one to graduate college.
Wow.
And I grew up in, like I said, central Connecticut. Back then it snowed, so I learned how to ski on a golf course and on a local park. When you had to sort of go down a little hill with wooden skis, and you would have to wax them. And so I kind of had one of those childhoods where we just went out and played all day, and when my mom would ring a bell, we'd come home for dinner.
That sounds very magical and special.
It was pretty normal back then, that's what we did.
Yeah. I am actually originally from South Florida, but I lived in central Connecticut for 13 years. So when you were talking about in your book about Bloomfield, Connecticut, my sister-in-law lives in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and I live in Hartford. Are you from Bloomfield?
No, I was from West Hartford, but my dad's store was in Bloomfield. So Mills Army-Navy in Bloomfield was his store.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was right down from the deli and next to the Greek. There was a Greek luncheonette, and there was the Jewish deli, and he was right in between, across from the bank. Kind of catty corner to Cumberland Farms, if you remember Cumberland Farms with all the
West
amazing
Hartford Center
Sundays.
area. I know you're talking about West Hartford. Oh, nice. Park Road area.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Park
nice.
Avenue.
Oh, okay. I love West Hartford. Okay.
Yeah, Central Connecticut. Yeah, and we lived on the last street in West Hartford before you hit Bloomfield, and back then it was just farms. In fact, we would ride our bicycles down Still Road and wind up at a dairy where we would just sort of munch out on Sundays with Pepperidge Farm cookies, because it was the 70s, so there was a lot of illegal substances back then. I just want to say. And so while we were protesting the Vietnam War, there was also little, nickel bags of things. So we were just normal Connecticut kids, is all I could say. And the way back.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so funny, like, to hear these stories, because Connecticut has such a reputation of being so many different things, and when you talk to different people, it depending on who you're speaking to, they may have had a different experience.
Oh yeah.
When you think of Stepford Wives,
not that. When I first came to New York, because that's where I live now, just north of New York City, about 25-30 miles. But when I first came to metropolitan New York and lived in the city, people say, "Oh, you lived in Connecticut." And I was like, No. I didn't live in Fairfield County.
Yeah.
I didn't. The Red Sox were my team.
Yeah.
That was the divider, right? I mean, the Yankees went so far, but my mother was a Yankees fan because she's from Queens. So we always had that divide in our family, even though none of us actually played any sports.
Okay. But in your heart, right?
In our heart, we had to be aligned. And finally, when the Red Sox, broke through after whatever their curse, we were like, yay!
Yeah.
Even though we don't really care. But,
right. That's what it's like growing up in South Florida. Like, everyone is like University of Florida, Florida State, University of Miami, and I couldn't care less. And my two sisters, two of my sisters went to University of Florida, and the other one went to Florida State, and they're always bickering, and I'm like, I really don't care.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
But that's very nice. So it kind of makes sense, when you think about it. You grew up in Connecticut, and I do feel like, especially that part of Connecticut, is very New England, and it makes total sense that you started your company, Ecobags, because of sustainable recycling philosophy.
Yeah, I kind of don't know if that came from my parents, though, or where I grew up, because aside from planting one specific strain of a plant at some point in my old, medium childhood to adulthood, I really had no interest in the environment other than it was there. But I went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and and when I was there, I did I was in theater, okay, so that was my trajectory, even though they didn't have a theater department. Well, they had somewhat of a theater department. I was an actor, but I went to Clark because they gave me a really good package, financial package. And I studied things like geography of American poverty. So back then, I was already learning about redlining, and I was learning about all these disparities, which are in such broad contrast right now, right?
Yeah.
What's going on. That coupled with, really studying theater and understanding what's involved in theater, the skills that you have to develop for communication, for listening, for playing with other people, for creating community. All of that sort of came together in a way that after college, my first job was with a theater company in Washington, D.C., where I worked in underserved communities. I was actually doing improv theater. I wasn't an actor with this. I was a technical assistant, but a production assistant, but we were going into Lorton State Reformatory, DC Correctional Facility, and different kinds of children's homes. I'm holding up quotes in Baltimore. So that was, really going into populations where it was what's now is exponentially more than what was then, and back then it was horrible. Mm-hmm. So that awareness of social conditions, and then you move to the Hudson Valley, right? And I moved to New York, and you see, as an actor, you can't live in the fanciest neighborhoods, so you live where you live. You live where you can afford rent. And I was living up in Washington Heights, and I always like to say pre-Hamilton, which I love Lin-Manuel and what he did. It's amazing. But anyway, I just saw plastic bags everywhere, and the thing is, were just garbage instantly. They were the cheap kind. They weren't even reinforced, and it just made me mad. It was like, it's so wasteful. Mm-hmm. And that's before I even knew what they were made of. And I'm tying that together in a long way to say that's when my environmental sort of awareness woke up, together with what I brought forward, which was my social, economic awareness. And then you tie that all in with the Hudson Valley and Pete Seeger and having an awareness around that. That's when it kind of woke up. I don't think it came from the suburbs in Connecticut.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Oh, darn. Yeah. I was trying to get some kind of...
Yeah, I know. However, the desire to own my own business did, because my dad owned his own business, largely because he was unemployable, right? He was like in his mid-40s when he lost his first store. But that idea of the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, that when you can be in charge of what you do, it's kind of contagious, even if it's not as secure as, and we see that now, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, we see that now. It is nowhere near as secure, or maybe people on the other side would say that's not secure either, but it's nowhere near as secure as being part of a larger mothership. But that's a really long sentence. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, your book, you really delved deep into how you started your company. And I actually listened to your book, so I had the pleasure of hearing you read your book, which is really amazing. And so I will take these nice walks, and I'll just be listening to your book. And I loved how you talked about the beginning stages of your journey of starting your company, how you took some steps back, and how you came to the realization that it will work. So can you walk us through those stages of, like, before you launched it and how you were able to prepare yourself financially to launch it? Because at one point you got a roommate, and the sacrifices you made to make sure that your company was a viable company.
Sure. Well, in the very beginning of starting the company was just basically like, oh, this is a good idea. I mean, and literally at our kitchen table, my husband said, oh, let's call it Ecobags. And I was like, okay, because he was a lyricist and a musician. I said, that works.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a financial plan. I didn't have a business plan. I just knew that I didn't want to continue doing the work I was doing in New York City for a company that I really didn't have any passion for. And I just had a baby, and I didn't want to be getting on the subway every day to go downtown to work in an office where I just didn't feel that connection. On top of that, the manager was a real jerk. So, and this was way before the conversation about, taking time off to have a baby. This was like, oh, you're pregnant, so you'll be back in a week, right?
Wow.
So it's like, no, I don't think so. So what we did is we just basically, my husband was a musician and sort of a freelance piano teacher at that point. And I had been an actor, and I'd worked a little bit at this. It wasn't really a corporate job. It was a small business sales position. And I was making good money. It wasn't fulfilling. And we just decided that maybe we could try this new thing, which was completely untested. We had no idea if there was a market for it, but I did some market testing. If we cut back on everything. So we cut back to the bone. We weren't making a whole lot of money, and we even cut back. I've tried to reconcile this many times, but I think the cost of living was so much less. But I haven't done the actuals, like what was $1 worth in 1989 versus now. I probably should do that. It's probably about 3 times more now. But like our rent was $750 or $1,000 a month, and we didn't really have that many more expenses other than food, right?
Yeah,
that was it.
Right.
So we just, make more, spend less. Save, spend less than you make, and we just stuck to that. And even with the baby. And even back then, I don't believe we had health insurance. In fact, I know we didn't. We had HIP, and so it was sort of a less expensive option for that. No market. We had to work to establish the market, which actually meant at that point, pre-internet, knocking on doors and saying, what do you think of this idea?
Yeah.
And we got a warm welcome. I think we might have hit like a first wave of consciousness around, we don't really need to use single-use items for everything. That there can be an awareness around conservation, preservation, and reusable, durable goods. Oh, as good, because we're so new at it, we just talk to everybody. You know, like we went to the local health food store. My husband did this, and I wouldn't even go into that store because it was gross. I mean, you know, old health food stores